You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey guys, welcome to episode 26 of Cards to the Moon. My name is Clark, and I'm with, as usual, Hyung and John. And today, now that it's been a month or so since the release of, I think, an insightful white paper on the state of the hobby by Josh Luber, who, for people who don't know, is the founder of StockX and now the co-founder and chief vision officer of Fanatics Trading Cards. I thought we could go over some of his key points and discuss whether we agree or disagree, like or dislike his point of view in his 50-page essay. But we'll get into that in a sec. Off the top, though, I just want to quickly ask you guys a trend we've all been seeing lately, which is modern base continues to tumble. Even Panini Select courtside base cards isn't immune to this trend. So, are you guys panicking at all, or are you buying, or option 3, continuing to wait on the sidelines and hope things stabilize sooner than later? Where are you guys at?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm not buying base, just in general. I told you this. I'm staying off base, but courtside base is a little different. I think particularly in basketball, courtside bases have dipped a lot, especially we talked about Luka's prices and Trae Young's prices in our chat group that we have, but I think it's still going to have that that demand because of the low pop, right? And it's the same thing. I think people who view these as great long-term investments, they start getting locked away, and there's one less, a person that is going to sell, that card. So as long as, I think the demand is still there, which I believe it is, because courtside is really low pop still. I think those are still the good buy. But other than that, I'm pretty much off base.
Okay. John?
Yeah, it looks like basketball is getting hit the most.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about it last week. I brought it up in our sort of 1v1 to see check on you guys to see where the floor is for you guys.
Right, last week, yeah.
Yeah. And at some point there is going to be a floor. I think this is that certainly, in my opinion, sort of like an emotional panic by the market. You can clearly see bigger cards continually moving upwards, and base cards, and that, like everybody keeps reporting Zion hit 20K, Luka hit 18K. So that conversation around high pop and junk slabs continues, like that narrative continues. So I think as that continues, people are starting to panic and they're starting to sell off their cards to try to trade up. Exactly what we're doing. So I can't blame anybody because we're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But at some point, I'm personally waiting on the sidelines. I'm kind of like on the same boat as you. I've sort of moved most of my collection towards numbered or things that are a little bit more rare. And I seem to, I'm enjoying that a lot more. And that chase to kind of get rare cards is a lot more fun. But in terms of, like we talked about last week, stepping stone to make some profits, to get into bigger cards, there is going to be an opportunity. So I'm just waiting on the sidelines. Particularly, we just mentioned courtside. I think courtside is going to be a huge buy. It's an SSP. And eventually when this market bottoms out, you're going to have to pick up courtside. Like it's base, but it's not really base. So I think courtside is a good one to keep an eye on. And I think 2012 Prism basketball is another great one that has been hit hard, and I think that's the one to keep an eye on. It's got Jimmy Butler's in there, Damian Lillard, and all the rest that you can imagine. Like there are just so many tons of rookies, and they're all down. For Toronto fans, Kawhi Leonard rookie once was 3,500 US. I think right now it's going for I think it might have gone sub 700, which is pretty crazy.
Wow.
So there's going to be a time where everyone's going to get back in. So I think I'm waiting on the sidelines, but keeping a keen eye on courtside, like Luka year courtside, and then the 2012 Prism. I think those are two key targets for myself.
Sure. Yeah, I don't have much to add to the discussion from what you guys already said. I was pretty anti-base to begin with when I first entered the hobby. So this kind of just strengthens my position, I guess. But what I've noticed is, like you guys were saying, sets like courtside, or as you mentioned too, the 2012 Prism basketball, which is iconic set.
Right.
Back in those days, those print runs weren't as high as current sets, right? So you got to keep that in as a factor. And other than those exceptions, though, yeah, I'm not gonna all of a sudden change my mind and get into base.
Right.
But like that being said, I think, and this might be a good segue to what we're going to talk about next. But if we believe more people are coming into the hobby as the hobby grows, there's going to be a room for base cards. I think it's kind of an entryway for collectors
for sure.
That are getting into the game, and there'll be should be a bump in demand as more people come into the hobby.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you got to just monitor the levels though. Like the thing is, every year, if the demand does increase from the collector's side, we don't want to see manufacturers go crazy on the print runs just to meet that new demand. And so yeah, so I guess you just got to be watchful or mindful of the balance between new people coming into the hobby and the print runs, especially with the base cards.
Right.
So yeah, we'll see. It's interesting, and it's I think I saw Luka Select courtside go for 2,600. I think that was the PSA 10. So it's getting there. It's getting to the point where like, I think I want to buy one now.
Yeah.
So we'll see. All right, now let's get into the meat of our discussion in today's hobby headlines. As many of you are aware, Josh Luber, who will play a key role when Fanatics takes over the MLB and NBA licenses to produce trading cards, released an essay detailing what he thinks is going on in the hobby right now and where we're headed. It's a long read, as I mentioned before, but most of us here were able to get through it, and there's a lot of interesting points. So in the interest of time, I picked out 5 that might warrant further discussion. So I'll go through them one by one and let you guys chime in whenever. Does that sound all right?
Sounds good.
Okay. So the first point is the boom of the hobby he mentions was going to happen anyway, but it was accelerated due to COVID, the pandemic, with people at home, stimulus checks, all the things we've heard before, right? But I thought what was more interesting was his explanation of the major correction of the hobby that we've experienced early this year, right? Q1 heading into Q2. And he attributes that major correction to what he calls the 3 C's. 1, card shows. 2, crypto. And 3, card grading. So quickly, I'll just kind of briefly explain what he means by those 3 C's. Card shows. He's saying essentially that with card shows opening up again, as the pandemic draws near to an end, hopefully, there's less action on eBay, right? So if there's less action on eBay, even if there's a fewer bidders, the total end cost of a card should decrease bit by bit, right? And then we look at those eBay comps, and then that's a new kind of normal. There's a new lower level of the cost of the card that you're aiming to get.
Right.
So opening of card shows, you see less action on eBay, and therefore prices decrease. And we all know we use eBay as a current market value for a lot of our cards. 2, crypto. A lot of these new collectors are younger in demographic, and they're also looking at other alternative assets, which means they're splitting their money invested into not just cards, but into crypto as well. And we talked about this before as well in a previous episode, right? Like how there's a strong correlation between people, younger collectors that invest in both crypto and cards. And, depending on the crypto market, if you're spending more money there, that just means less money for cards and vice versa, right?
Right.
And 3, card grading. We also talked about this, that PSA and BGS shut down their services. So the implications of that we discussed earlier, but essentially, unsurprisingly, it decreases demand because you can't rip boxes anymore and then grade them quickly and cheaply. And then it also undermines the confidence in the sports card market temporarily because there's no action. No one's selling anymore because these grading services are being shut down. So That's a long-winded way of explaining those three C's. Sorry, but
No, that was good.
What do you guys think? Do you think those three C's kind of pretty much nails it on the head, attributes the major correction we've seen earlier this year? Would you add anything to it, or did you disagree with any of those three C's that I just mentioned?
Well, I think I agree. I definitely agree with COVID being kind of like a catalyst, right? To kind of like that market, and what Josh was saying, that that the market was going to boom regardless. And I had honestly the same feeling, because that's why I kind of went in, in 2018, 2019, because I felt like, there was going to be a resurgence of a boom, but we didn't realize that, what we thought in 2020 was a threat, which was COVID, was the catalyst that kind of led to this. And then what he was referring, I guess, the card show is what is limiting, I guess, eBay sales. So
Right.
I guess comps are lower, right? It's interesting to me that we actually go off eBay comps. I guess there's no other way to
know.
assign value, but like if you told someone who's coming new into the market, it's like what determines value? Oh, well, product sales, like eBay, right? So and this is where I believe there what needs to happen is the technology that we heard even from Chris Costa is getting implemented to an industry where we could evolve, and change is key. We always talk about this as well. We want to create solutions to the problems in the industry, and the more we do that, the more opportunities with companies, businesses to open up shop, which means more investment money coming into the hobby, and it ends up kind of creating that change, right? So going back to the whole eBay thing, in terms of a price, that always was a concern to me, and I think us going off eBay comps, it's not a true value, but we're kind of seeing that that's what we're going. So we go to card shows and we say, okay, what was the last eBay comp? Everybody's going off eBay comps, right? So I think where technology comes in, and I don't know how it's going to be done, but where you get more true value, and it's not a single source like eBay, where that's where the assigned value is, and based off that, it could be not true, because you know what I mean. There could have been a private sale done, on a low pop card that doesn't have a comp for it. So in that case, yes, I do believe it does affect pricing. And moving to crypto, 100%. We've always said this, that I'm in the same way. I'm a big believer. I'm long and bullish on some crypto, and I think it affects your cash flow position in terms of where your investment money goes, right? So I think it's going to be interesting, because I think they're going to intertwine. I've always said this. It's a way that I believe that technology in the industry can get better. Is crypto. That whole space in technology, crypto, intertwining with cards, right? So I believe the younger collectors are on that, and they've seen success. A lot of people during COVID invested in crypto and did very, very well, because there was no other option. And again, you use a negative event to kind of spark change, evolvement. A lot of people weren't in that avenue or in that area of investment, but they personally experienced success, so they start moving and start evolving, right? Even with their own investment goals and plans, right? So I believe that it is all good, because it forces change, right? Even the whole crypto. And PSA, BGS, we talked about this too. When they shut down, it was probably the worst for us, because we're like, I have so much more cards to send in, and I want to make my my tendies, my profits. So but as that happens, more companies pop up, and it betters the hobby, and overall we're just so confused, because we're in it, right? And when you're in it, you just don't see the macro lens ever, because the micro is so confusing. And I believe that's what I think he was spot on. First, I think Josh is a genius. Like that paper, if you haven't read Me and John we talked about this before. Like, we don't like reading, but we were glued onto that, right?
Oh,
like,
man.
I mean, that article was so good. But yeah, that's my first take on those 3 points. I know it was long, but yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's good.
Yeah, when you think of 50 pages, like a 50-page essay, no, most guys are going to be like, no, that does not interest me at all. But yeah, I haven't read a book in forever. But man, that was legitimately a fascinating and entertaining read. Like it had me captivated for 25 straight pages sitting down straight. So definitely recommend the read. He goes into some serious detail. And like Hyung said, very super intelligent guy. So if you want to have anyone here listening, like if you want to have a better understanding of what really happened and to hear on his theory, I think he nailed it. Like, I don't think we all kind of had some ideas of what was kind of happening, but you couldn't really articulate it well, right. Or we weren't super confident that our opinion was absolutely correct. But he kind of rounded it all really well together, and I think all of it makes sense. And me personally, I really like his second seed, which is the crypto portion. I always believed, from my memory of the run in Q1, and I mean, I'm not a big market guy, but any like big technical run, like that was a massive run. Like it was like foolproof. You could buy any card, and it's like 2xing in 5 days, and it's 4xing in 14 days. It was ridiculous. Like it was like dummy proof. You could buy anything. And that run pretty much ended. I mean, his chart looks a little different because he's probably following a couple of different cards. But in my memory, it was right around the second week of February 2021 where the market started to come down. That was like almost immediately after those Jordan 10s that sold for $785. And I think the third one sold in February or something like that for like $380. And then it just started to come down and it started to collapse. And for me, when you take a look at that, after February starting to come down, and then you correlate that to crypto started making its run in like March, April. So when you think of all the new investors that were in sports cards, like clearly for me, I personally saw a correlation. We talked about it on the show, on the podcast, that it looked like people were taking their money to crypto because crypto was taking off on a run, right? So that was really taking a lot of money away from the card market at a time when it was going down. And all of these new investors, like, Josh mentions this a lot. One of the most important things amongst this entire essay was confidence, consumer confidence. And I think anybody new who came in right around Q1 spent crazy money because it was bulletproof and then lost a lot of money. That kind of a burn your confidence is going to completely deplete. And while crypto was making a run, they start putting their money in crypto. And then next thing you know is, you know what? I kind of give up on sports cards. I'm going crypto. I'm moving all of my money that I had in cards and I'm putting in crypto. And we even saw it in each other. Like we were kind of actually doing that a little bit in like March, April, right? So for me, I think the second point of the crypto, I think that really had like a pretty big effect on that Q1 collapse. And then in terms of the overall what happened in 2021, I think card shows definitely had an effect. It does certainly suck that eBay is kind of like the Beckett magazine of our era. Like we just, no matter, right. even if only 10 people were on eBay and not buying, we would still probably go with eBay comps. Like it, right. Which is unfortunate, but that's just the way it is right now. And then I never thought of PSA BGS closing had that much of an effect. But when he mentioned the whole like people ripping boxes and then immediately goes into submission grading, like 100, 200, 300 cards. And that you get that back at $11 a grading and you sell it for 50, 60, 100 bucks, frees up cash to go in again. It makes sense. It's like this, the cyclical earning that allows you to have that cash flow, right? So when that cash flow dried up, that would also make sense that affected the card market. So really good read. I think those points were spot on. I really think there was for me personally, I think the crypto portion was a big emphasis, just particularly on the crash. But the rest of 2021, all of it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure. I won't add too much to it, otherwise it'll be a 2-hour podcast show because we're only on point one. But to your points, guys, I think, well, let me address the boom of the hobby. I totally agree with this point that it was going to happen anyway, because when I got back into it, this was pre-pandemic. You know what I mean? Like, and I can't remember why I got into it. Like, I think one day I just saw on the internet, like, oh, a Joe Carter rookie card. I think I want one now that I can kind of afford one. You know, like I don't have to rip boxes to try to find one. I could buy it on eBay. You know, and there's this novelty of doing that, and so I just got into it, and then I think, you know, what happened is, like, I'm not the only one in my age group that felt the same way. We were all nostalgic about sports cards, and then next thing you know, you talk to one person, you're like, "Hey, what? You're into sports cards too?" And then just kind of grew organically that way. And then of course, when the pandemic hit, like, that's when we started our WhatsApp chat group. That's when so many more people got into it. So definitely it was the accelerant, I think, and I agree with that point. And just one quick point about eBay. I think it's funny because a lot of people do DM me on 5 Card Guys saying, "Hey, what do you think this card is worth?" And I always say, like, you got to check eBay comps. Like, that's our current market value. That's what we're going by, you know? That's what everyone's going by. And for better or for worse. And I do agree that, you know, it's not the perfect solution, but that's just kind of what we're using. But as we progress and evolve in the hobby with more technologies, as you're kind of alluding to, Hyung, I think there'll be more ways to measure that data of sales, where it's coming from. And it's already kind of happening with, like, market movers, I think, by Sports Card Investor. I think you can see sales not just from eBay, but other auction houses. So it's kind of this aggregate data. And I think that's only going to get better as we progress in the hobby. And then, if, you know, the only thing left is to make that information available. You know, you still have to pay for some of that with market movers and other websites, but you don't have to pay for any of it by eBay. But if you had that aggregate data, I think that will eventually become the new norm, where we can kind of check. I guess the only missing piece is card shows. Like, how do you monitor sales at card shows, live card shows, right? Like, it's hard to do that, but maybe there's a way. Maybe someone smarter than myself will figure out how to kind of capture that data somehow. And then, you know, as we have more data, it'll be better for the hobby and everyone in it to kind of measure true current value rather than just going by eBay comps. So point number 2 is, where are we now in the hobby? He addresses that question using a baseball analogy. What inning are we in when it comes to the hobby? And he actually separates it out into 3 categories. And those are prices, people, and companies. So regarding prices, he says we're probably in the 5th or 6th inning. And I think what he means by that is that he feels like there's still room to grow. We're in the middle of the game. There's still room to grow, but it can't possibly continue at the same rate as we've seen in the last couple of years, where, you know, John, you just mentioned, like, you could buy any card, you know, 2x, 4x, and it's just easy money that way. But things have kind of stabilized and, you know, corrected itself. And he feels like in terms of prices, we're in the 5th or 6th inning. Still can make profits, still can make room to grow, but it won't be as easy as it was when the hobby really started booming. Regarding people, he thinks we're earlier in the game, 3rd or 4th inning, which means he cites that some new people have come into the hobby and returned to the hobby, like ourselves, but he feels like there is room for a lot more to come into the hobby. So more bullish on just generally more collectors coming into the hobby space and then kind of supporting the industry. So he feels like we're in the 3rd or 4th inning. And the last thing he mentions is companies, and he feels like on that front we're in the 2nd or 3rd inning. And what he mentions in terms of companies, he includes marketplaces like StockX or StarStock. Some of you might have heard of that company. Manufacturers, you know, Topps, Panini. Fractional marketplaces, Collectible, Rally, Road. And price guide data companies like Card Ladder, right? He also includes breakers and grading companies, PSA, SGC, BGS as well. So all these companies, tech companies, he thinks there's plenty more innovation and business opportunities to be had in the hobby, which is why he says we're in the 2nd or 3rd inning. Like, there are companies that we probably haven't even heard of yet that are going to be big in the hobby. So he feels like we're early in the game. So you can take a position on any of these 3, or just is there one that kind of kind of stuck out to you in terms of prices, people, or companies, and where we're at with those three things?
I think in general, like prices, we've noticed that there was a big boom and it kind of corrected itself, and now it's kind of a long bullish run. So I do agree that we are kind of late in prices, or at least we don't know, right? And that's the thing. I think it goes to points 2 and 3. The people and companies that evolve the industry will totally change pricing, because we haven't even talked about let's just say big tech entering the space, right? And this is where I see NFTs and fractional shares becoming actual sound investments, where it's becoming a lot more based on an investment portfolio rather than buying and selling, right? So I think there's so much room, and even though we might be in an area where prices have skyrocketed, I think the potential is endless, because if you think about it, a Jordan PSA 10 could be $1 million card in somebody's eyes. In 20, 30 years with the technology, there might be, 100 people that think that the Jordan is worth that much as well. And that's all it takes, right? And it once kind of like that big tech, even crypto, that's why I say crypto, once big tech gets into crypto, that space is going to rocket, and the involvement and the potential of where that's going is going to change the infrastructure, I think, as well. So in terms of pricing, I do believe that we did witness a boom, and then it sort of retracted on a correction, and I expect it to kind of keep that trend with volatility spikes here and there. But I think we're still early in the industry in general, right? Like, I mean, if you think about it, this industry just started, a year, 2 years ago, like the boom where new companies have started, and it's easy to say, okay, we're just going to throw in the flag now because, prices are tanking. This industry is dead. It's not as linear or black and white as people think. I think people think so black and white. Slabs are done and it's end of story, right? It's like we don't know what slabs are gonna look like in the future, first and foremost, right? So I think I look at it in that context, just being seeing, I guess, these opinions and perspectives from successful entrepreneurs and big names like Josh Luber, and even we talked similar things with Chris Costa. He was talking about technology, and technology is new companies that are going to emerge because of these technologies, and basically they're going to bring in new money. New money is going to bring in new people. New people are going to affect the prices. So I think they go all hand in hand with all three.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah, great points. Man, first of all, I don't necessarily like the inning analogy in general. I think it strikes a lot of, generally kind of strikes, I get why it's used, but generally strikes a lot of fear that there is an end to the game, or there is an impending doom at some point, or impending doom, sorry. For me, we've all been collecting since we were really young, and I don't think there's an end to collecting in sports cards, period, unless we're talking about an end to sports. If sports is not ever ending, collecting and memorabilia will never end. Now, in terms of whether it's going to be a crazy market or just some small niche market, that's a different story. But based on the amount of companies that are just investing big dollars, big name people with a lot of money investing big dollars in companies and so forth, I think in terms of like prices, I think prices will start to move a lot slower than what we've seen, obviously, because that was just a ridiculous record-breaking pace. But I still think we're still going to see a lot of volatility. We're still going to see a lot of room growing. There are going to still be a lot of spikes. And it's not just going to be this very slow kind of slow progression of growth. I still think there's going to be a lot of volatility in sports cards. And for me, why I say that is because I really believe in this younger investment market, these younger people. Like these guys aren't, they're investing in crypto. Crypto money goes up and down really quick. And people aren't, the new age investors, not scared to spend money. They're not scared to overbid on things. If they want something and they're going for it, they're going to overbid. Like I think the money coming in is a lot different than what we were used to in the past. And people kind of spending conservatively and not really like overreaching their means. There's a lot of people out there which maybe crazy, maybe not, but people really like, leverage their debt to get into like crypto and hope that crypto moves quicker than the interest rates and all of that stuff, right? So I think this new age investor world, like people aren't afraid to spend money and they're in this sports card hobby and game. And I think you're going to see the results of this. And I still see tons of room to grow and I could see more runs and fast runs too. Not as slow as Josh is predicting, but I could see some more fast runs ahead of us.
Sure. Yeah, those are interesting points. So you think we're going to go into extra innings?
Oh yeah.
I think we're born to play extra innings.
Yeah. For sure.
No, there's no end to it. Never ending.
Okay, nice.
Sorry, lastly, to add on to that, I think the most important thing that he outlines too, that is so different than the past, because the crash in '94, the kids left the hobby. And I think the most important point that he makes is the kids are coming back in. And with kids in the market,
excellent point.
That is gonna, that gives anybody confidence that this market is here for the long run, right? So
yeah, and to that point, I'm glad you brought that up. I think he also put in his white paper that the average age of the people who attended the national this past year or this past summer was
25 years.
It was 25 years compared to like 50 or 60 prior to that, right? So definitely skewing younger, which is a sign of good health in the market for sure, right? Because the future's involved now.
And I just mentioning, John, you said like in the 90s, like people picked up and left. And that's the difference between, I think, then and now is we live in a digital world and relevancy is important, right? And what we didn't have before is this digital form of communication. And I think that plays a huge factor into how we could do business, how we can do deals, how we can trade globally, not even locally anymore. It's like globally, right? So all of these factors couldn't exist without the infrastructure of the internet, essentially, right? And I believe that seeing it in that lens, that's just like a 3D, dimensional way of seeing it. But then now we take NFTs and technology and crypto, I see 5D, like multiple facets of possibilities that we haven't even thought of, right? So that's all I'm saying is like the culture now, the people now, a lot smarter in terms of the technology aspect, and I think that's going to play an absolute huge role into where we go in the future.
Right, and a huge difference is sports cards has basically turned into an investment class, right? Like everybody is in the hobby, and what better way to be in a hobby that also makes you money? Like that's incredible. That's like everybody's dream. Like most people's dreams is to do what you love. Usually it's pro sports and get paid for it. So you're in a hobby that you can make money off of. Like that's incredible, right? And I think that's a huge difference between the 90s. The 90s, you're not making money. You're just spending money. You're spending and spending and spending and ripping and ripping and ripping. And you're not selling anything because you can't. There's the Beckett price guy says the Ken Griffey's worth $19, right? And in 8 months, the Beckett price guy says that the Ken Griffey's worth $21. It's not like you're not turning profits. You're just spending and spending and spending. So in this new world, you're spending and you're regaining profits and all that stuff, right? So I think the money continues to flow.
When we collected in the 90s, come on, we thought sports cards was a financial asset, but it turned out to be the case.
That's why we collected, right? This rookie card's going to be millions of dollars.
Yeah, that Todd Van Poppel is going to be
the killer.
Yeah. I'll just mention about companies. I totally agree. It's so early in the game for companies because the way innovation works, it builds upon one another, right? Like one company comes out and with a certain technology, and then another company builds on that technology that makes it possible for them to do new things.
Correct.
And I think it's just this kind of virtuous cycle. So I'm really excited about what kind of innovations happening, especially in the tech space. And people, like personally, I think it's probably even earlier than third or fourth inning, to tell you the truth. Like, when I look at my 5-Card Guys account on Instagram, there's so many people that DM saying like, hey, I just got back into the hobby. Like it's a almost a daily occurrence. Like you
Right.
just see people coming, like, and we feel like, oh, we've been doing this for 4 or 5 years now. It must be slowing down. No, like people are starting now, like today, getting into sports cards. And you know, we've even seen in our WhatsApp chat group, like different guys joining the chat group because they just got reacquainted with the hobby, you know?
I've been recruiting too. I have friends that are joining. You know, I had a friend buy a Carmelo refractor PSA 9 a steel. Yeah, that's what so new people every day. Yeah, every day
New people,
coming out.
and just get them to, you know, rip open some wax. They'll be hooked for life.
That's the bait.
Dangerous.
It's a bait. Yeah.
Dangerous.
Yeah. All right. So, okay, let's move on to point number 3. And this is Josh Luber is going over some warning signs, I guess, or something we need to be careful about as we move forward. So this is more kind of immediate. And one point he brings up is being careful with overproduction, but not in the total number of cards like we've experienced in the junk wax area where they just printed millions and millions of cards to meet demand, or not even in the number of sets, because he argues that we kind of hit this calendar imposed limit with sets. So he uses Panini Football as an example. It released 47 different sets in 2020. So
Damn.
if we have 52 weeks in a year, you
Yeah,
can't
it's so
go
ridiculous.
more than
That's
you
insane.
can't go probably more than 52. Like, you know, one release a week essentially. So we're pretty much at the limit in terms of number of new sets you can release. But he focuses on overproduction of chase cards, right? Like the autos, the parallels. And we actually talked about this as well in our previous podcast about Panini Select this year, producing, I think he cites it in his own paper too, that Panini Select number of parallels increased from 23 in 2019, 45 in 2020. So 45 different parallels in the Panini Select basketball set. And he also cites Anthony Edwards, because there's a lot more sets, has 30 one-of-ones in 2020 versus Zion in 2019. He had 14 one-of-one cards. So even one-of-ones are, relatively speaking, not as rare as they were in previous years. And if that trend continues, isn't it crazy to think one-of-ones is no big deal? You know what I mean?
Right.
So like what do you guys think about that aspect of overproduction of chase cards? Have you experienced that, or do you feel that now?
I feel definitely in 2021.
Oh, yeah.
The newer sets.
No
You
question.
have different parallels. You have different number. Even in baseball, you have higher numbered parallels that never existed, and stuff like that. Where I think it's tough because you look at. It's very, very important, one, that Panini doesn't overproduce. Like, period. So I think overproduction is very different than I guess releases with. I guess that's a different form of overproduction, but yeah, I think Panini is like, this past year was brutal. I didn't rip too much with Panini because there's like select retail now, right? There's all these, and there's multiple one-of-ones. What's the point of one-of-ones, right? But then you look back and I asked this question. It builds perspective, like Chris was saying about sticker autos versus on-card autos, right? You look back, does that make the previous sets that much more valuable, right? That the print runs weren't like that, right? So on the flip side, I think it's not great, but it could also mean that it'll give you perspective on kind of like your older cards and appreciate your lower pop cards. But there has to be a fine equilibrium and balance between the manufacturers making their cut and a secondary market, right? So I think that's where Panini and Upper Deck, Topps, they're trying to monetize the best they can without, crashing or ruining the market. So they think that the best way to do that is go in width, right? Not in height, meaning release more sets so that, the Topps Chrome will still be the Topps Chrome. It's going to be the desired, but then there's like Topps Finest, Topps Black, Topps Chrome Black, and all these, 57th set options that, and I think it's just a business thing, but I believe that I think they should just increase primary prices. To be honest, I know it'll piss people off, but like I don't think overprinting is the solution for sure.
Yeah. We talked about it many times. Like I personally hate it. Like I hate seeing.
Yeah.
I hate like Select. It bothers me when I see it. Just seeing all the parallels. I mean, the easiest clue of overproduction is you just go back even a year ago or 2 years ago. One of ones, pulling a one of one or seeing one on eBay or seeing one was like a unicorn. Capturing somebody ripping a break of a one-on-one was like an incredible moment. And now you see it like literally on a daily basis. Oh my gosh, LaMelo one of one. Like it, the amount of one-on-ones you see on eBay, the amount of one-on-ones you see on people's IG accounts of being pulled, like that like is the easiest clue to see that there's overproduction of chase cards. So, yeah, I personally hate it as a collector. It's just so even the one of ones get so devalued. Like when you look at Select, I don't know how many there are, but you know, there's like the black one of one, there's a fast break black one of one, there's the scope black one of one. Like I don't know how many black one of ones there are, but it's crazy, and it just starts to devalue. Like even if you had a Pulsar out of 13, it doesn't feel as special anymore, right? Because it's just one of many other different colors that are numbered out of 13 or numbered out of 25 or numbered out of 35, right? So yeah, I personally don't like it. I really hope it doesn't help that both Panini and Topps have lost their license, so they could be sort of on tilt mode where they're just going to try to make as money.
Yeah.
That certainly doesn't help in the next couple of years, but I really hope that Fanatics and even Topps and Panini, I hope they can do the hobby good by taking this or charting it carefully rather than just going nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we'll see how that plays out, right? Like when we think about the next few years before Fanatics takes over the licensing, and you know, we assume or speculate that Panini and Topps will just print like crazy and have these, you know, 50 one-of-ones next year. Mm-hmm. I think the perception is going to be key too from the collectors. Like at some point we're going to be thinking like we are now, like one-of-ones aren't that scarce anymore. And if we perceive it that way, then the value of it decreases. Wow. And then the product itself decreases. Then who's going to rip that product? We don't want to rip, you know, a product where it advertises 50 parallels in this set. You know, when you rip this box open, it's like, do I really want 50 parallels coming out of this set if I know that it's probably more than half of it won't be worth anything? So we'll see how those manufacturers, you know, what they do next in the next few years, and who knows, like, you know, a lot can happen. Like they could be bought out by Fanatics, or they could partner with Fanatics. So maybe it's better for them not to overproduce chase cards, you know, because I like that example that Josh Luber uses about Nikes, you know, like when they drop Jordans, they create, you know, scarcity by limiting the amount of Jordans that are released. And I like, especially like the point of that paradox where, you know, he says, just go on Twitter. You see all these angry people saying like, you know, produce more Jordans, you know, like I couldn't get any, but they don't really want Nike to produce more. Right. They just want to be one of the lucky few that gets a pair, you know? Exactly. And I think the companies have to, hopefully those manufacturers will see that to be, you know, to have their brand worth something and, you know, to really keep growing, they got to have that kind of discipline not to overproduce chase cards or cards in general, and keep certain things scarce so that people will want to line up for their product, you know, to keep that demand high, so to speak. Right. So yeah, it's it'll be interesting to watch.
So just a thought, like if we're heading down this slope of overproduction of parallel cards, and if base is already falling and parallel cards start to become a little less awesome, you know, this can really, for people out there looking to make a move, I don't know, me personally, I think this is where things like Kaboom and Color Blast could separate itself, because you're talking about a super rare case hit that is a completely different image of a rookie card. Let's say LaMelo Color Blast, And there's no parallels. I think there's maybe the gold vinyl 1 of the Color Blast, but other than that, it's straight. That's the only card that's out there, right, of that image. So I think this might give an opportunity of a play in something like Kaboom or Color Blast. And also, don't sleep on Vintage. I really think that Vintage could also make a bit of a comeback here as people kind of get tired of the ultra modern. They look elsewhere for things that are a lot more rare and then start going back to like Magic Johnson rookie cards, Larry Bird rookie cards, and stuff like that, right? So
I think as well, just to talk about parallels, I think what you're seeing too, especially in the more baseball, you see it in basketball too. There's people talk about true parallels, right? I believe like with having all these shimmers and all these random things, it's going to separate, I think, the true refractors even more, right? So you have the hobbyists that are true hearted, and that's going to affect the pricing because there's just going to be a lot more demand for those true parallels, right? So it's all, I guess, polarity. You know, it brings in perspective. Like it's the whole analogy or paradox of sticker autos. Love them, but you need them. Kind of without them, you can't appreciate the on-card auto, right?
That's
so
true.
It's like as parallels increase, yeah, it sucks that there's all these weird parallels, but then it makes that true orange or true red refractor that much more valuable and nicer, right? So
100%. All right, let's move on to point number 4, and this is alluding to that chart he shared in the white paper, and I'll try to explain it by starting with one of his quotes in the essay. He says, "Trading cards are the rare product, perhaps a unicorn product, that is equal parts 4 industries: culture, commerce, finance, and gaming." So just to break those 4 industries a little bit more and how it relates to cards. Number 1, I'll say culture. He's talking about cards being culturally relevant. So whether it's in media, with celebs, with influencers, A-listers getting into cards, right? 2, commerce, cards as a business, hobby shops, retailers, breakers, tech companies, all those things growing and being part of a growing industry. 3, finance, cards as a financial asset. We talked about this earlier, that we can use cards, sports cards, as an investment or alternative investment asset. And 4, gaming, cards used in the gambling world. He says Vegas, maybe instead of betting on horses, we bet on cards. Like, who do we think is going to be a breakthrough player? And then we think that card's going to be worth something, and then we could cash out when he becomes the MVP, kind of like anyone who bought Shohei in March of this year, right? So that's a bit of gambling involved there, right? When you're hoping to cash out at some point. So he's saying trading cards hit those 4 industries, and the relevant point in that is that it can grow in any of those 4 industries. So there's so much potential for trading cards to grow. And he compares that to other things like sneakers. Josh Luber started out with StockX and being a marketplace for sneakers. But he even says sneakers are mostly impacted in the commerce area where you can, shoe stores, Nike stores, things like that. And in culture, it's celebs showing off their kicks, those things, right? But it's not really used as a financial asset. You can't really trade shoes for money or invest shoes long term, I guess. In gaming, it's hard to do that. So it's mainly commerce and culture for sneakers. He also talks about NFTs. He says that's mainly a financial asset, which I'm sure we all agree in, and a culture thing as well. As people get into NFTs, there's different communities out there that are really into it. And then daily fantasy, so DFS, people that are in fantasy leagues, that's been growing as well. But that's only more relevant in the gaming area. That's self-explanatory. And culture as well. When you have fantasy leagues, groups that you can get together with and just really have a good time with. So those things like sneakers, NFTs, daily fantasy, he touches upon 2 of those industries, but he sees trading cards touching upon all 4 of those things, where therefore the potential is really 2x all those other things. Right. Do you agree with that assessment? You think trading cards has that potential to be way bigger than sneakers, way bigger than NFTs, way bigger than daily fantasy leagues?
Honestly, the only person that can articulately conclude this or actually put this into something that's understandable to a regular consumer is someone like Josh Luber. I'm telling you right now, that is 1,000% spot on. And I guarantee you most people can't even break that down. And for him to articulate it,
Right.
it just shows you why he's in the position he is, right? And it's 100% true. Like these four things: culture, commerce, finance, gaming, they are the main movers, right? And trading cards hits all of them, like 100, and you don't even know which way it's going to go, or if it's going to go all four ways constantly, right? But there's no other asset that can be categorized as this, and like you said, NFTs are cool and all, but it lacks that culture component of nostalgia, or even like what's relevant, like face to face with culture in today's society. It's like once you buy crypto or whatever it is, it's just there, right? And I think like I couldn't even sum it up in a better way. And then on top of that, you summarized it the way you did. So it's like, yeah, I'm just saying 100%. I couldn't agree more. And only a genius literally can conclude that, right? So I have nothing else to say, but other than, 100%.
Yeah, Hyung nailed it. I mean, I can't disagree with it because I myself couldn't personally articulate it the way he did. So just looking at the way it was broken down, I think it makes a ton of sense. I would argue that NFTs would have a chance to be a unicorn as well and touch on all four aspects. But yeah, definitely it's different than sneakers. It's different than, like daily fantasy, like in the gaming and cultural space. And, yeah, it's, it gives, most importantly, as you read it, it gives you confidence, especially for some of the newer investors that got into it recently and are having a tough time with some of their losses and not feeling as confident. When you read his white paper, you come out of it feeling very confident and very optimistic about the future of sports cards. So that's, I think, what's most important is he outlines a lot of the dangers, but then he really shows, listen, we're early on and this is where it's going. And this is why I feel confident that it's not just because big money players are coming into it. He's breaking down everything of why he thinks this is such a special, hobby or investment to be in. So yeah, I do agree.
Yeah. Without repeating you guys, if you haven't seen the white paper, like that breakdown is genius.
Yeah.
Right. You understand it very quickly. And the one thing I'm still waiting to see is, I guess, culture. I hope so, because I think sports cards are cool. And I think it's still early in the game, like other than what's his name? Logan
Logan Paul.
Flexing his Charizard,
Yeah.
making that cool. We joked when he did that, like we're gonna see more people do stunts like that. Like showing their collection.
When you have celebrities, when you have celebrities hoarding and loving their collection, I think that's gonna define the culture aspect. It already has, right? You get guys like Justin Bieber and guys that are into cards that totally impact our society, right? So.
Yeah.
And I think more and more of that's going to be happening. Like we talk about Steve Aoki, when he first got into it, it's like, what? Aoki's in cards, So I think it's still pretty early. Like even when we hear celebs get into it, we're like, what? They're in it? Yeah, and then, like I talk to my regular friends, here locally, they're still clueless about, about cards, right?
Yeah. We're not fully there yet. We still get called nerds here and there.
We're not fully there, for sure. They look at us weird still, but that's okay. Yeah. It'll definitely get there, I believe. But yeah, all those things are great, and it's a perfect segue to the last point. And he begins and pretty much ends his essay answering this one question, which is, are cards here to stay, or is this the beginning of the end? And his quote at the end says, in short, both cards and card businesses will become more valuable. And just like we thought decades ago, card collecting is here to stay. Not just stay, but prosper. So just your thoughts on just that last definitive statement.
That's why we named this podcast Cards to the Moon, right?
Exactly.
1000%.
That's all I have to say.
I know.
Nice.
Oh, you said it. That's all. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. Yeah. No, and honestly, like after reading this paper, I was just excited to be in this space, like even more so than before. It's kind of like, it was fun, getting into cards is fun, growing with the community and just getting to meet more people. And after reading this, I'm just like more optimistic about the future, like all the different ways we can get involved even further into the hobby. And, outside of this podcast, the three of us are always talking about like, what else can we do? That's hobby related. How can we grow with this industry and, just be a major player in it as well. So just quickly to end off this segment, Josh Luber actually gave an interview to Sports Card Nonsense, the other podcast. Right. And it was pretty insightful. I don't know if you guys heard it, but there was a few points that he brought up in that interview. I just want to kind of get kind of a rapid fire response from you guys or impressions from what you guys think came out of that interview. So first, he says he doubts there will be a Fanatics branded product. We kind of joked about this when Fanatics got the license. We're like, oh, when are we going to see Fanatics Series 1 or Fanatics Update? He just thinks, or he just says, he just doubts there's going to be a Fanatics branded product. I think that alludes to potentially buying out other companies and keeping the brand, like we discussed as well in an earlier pod, like Topps or Panini, or if not buying other companies outright, having partnership deals. So they could use that brand or leverage the brand that exists. Right. So yeah, that was kind of interesting to me. Surprised there, or makes sense?
You know what? It's always good to have a guy like Josh, who's a true hobbyist and has passion and love for the industry, to be one of the industry leaders, right? Because he's not in it to just capitalize and monetize. He's in it to actually create those future timelines that I always talk about, and creating solutions to the problem that we need, right? So yeah, no, having him in the captain seat, someone like that, I love that he mentioned that, to be honest, because I would love, like, Topps is so rich, Topps is so rich in baseball, like I would hate to see that go. I think it should stay. I think it would be better for the hobby, it'd be better for everybody, the whole industry, right? And I don't think branded Fanatics product, people would be waiting in line. If anything, there was a couple of Fanatics releases in basketball. They did, and they're the worst selling cards, to be honest.
I hope that's a lesson for them. I just want to say the second point. We also talked about this, hobby shops. We were thinking, what's the future for hobby shops if Fanatics, with their rich distribution system and channels, if they could do everything in-house, what does that mean for hobby shops? And surprisingly, to me, it was surprising that Josh mentioned he wants to see more hobby shops. He thinks it's going to be integral to the growth of the hobby. And it kind of is counterintuitive in a lot of ways. But if you think about it, he says he believes that the sports card market, as we were just talking about earlier in this podcast, will continue to grow and therefore accommodate more players in the hobby, including hobby shops. And he uses the sneaker industry as an example. When he started up StockX, it was a sneaker industry was a certain size, and now the size of StockX is 3-4 times bigger than what this whole sneaker industry was. Right. In other words, the industry grew and accommodated a lot of other players as well, and not being monopolized essentially by one company. Right. So your thoughts on that?
I personally, I love that portion. Like we talked before, when the Fanatics news first broke, we were really worried about hobby shops. As a collector and people that are deeply involved with the community, that's huge. Like that's community hub space we're talking about, right? So for somebody like Josh Luber, who has that in the future, in short order, will have that much power in his hands, for him to be a fan of hobby shops and the community at large and to support it, number one, is just great to hear. And I'm sure hobby shops kind of breathe a little sigh of relief hearing that news. And then number two, I think it really just starts to really show that Fanatics will probably buy out one, if not multiple companies in this, right? They're going to, because it makes sense, right? You're going to buy out Topps and you're going to keep all the existing logistics and all the existing partnerships with hobby shops and this and that, and then go from there. So yeah, I think it further emphasizes the fact that, number one, he kind of said that Fanatics is probably not going to go into their own branding. And then number two, he's talking about hobby shops, and he'd like to see more hobby shops, which kind of gives you a little clue that they're going to keep the same logistics train going, right? The distribution channels. So great to see. Like it was great. It was really good interview, and it was really great to hear those points.
All right, and the last point I want to bring up before we wrap up this segment, he says he doesn't think Fanatics will have their own grading company. So that was another thing that we thought could happen, that they could do everything in-house, including grading.
Right.
But he just thinks PSA and even BGS, they're just too strong of a brand with a major head start, and they just rather let them continue to do what they're doing and just kind of work in tandem with current grading companies. So, yeah, what do you guys think about that?
I think, overall, I think he's in it for kind of like the overall health of the industry, which I love, and I think that's what's needed. We need industry leaders like him that, it is a sigh of relief. Hearing all this is something that, I didn't want to see Fanatics try to, monopolize everything and brand everything Fanatics, and, the fun in, tops. I would go nuts if they took away prospecting, like first chromes,
right?
Like Bowman. Like that's one thing that I was really concerned about, but personally, but I'm just glad that, like I said, it's very, very confidence in the industry leader that's in place, in Josh, and to me that is just a very, very reassuring thing to have someone like him, and even sharing his thoughts and seeing where his mindset and his perspective is on this, because we could dream all we want, but the industry leaders are the ones that are kind of paving the way. So seeing that this is where his mindset is, I'm all for it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I like it too. I think it makes sense from a business standpoint. Obviously, we don't know the numbers or anything, but to start a grading company fresh without knowing the ins and outs, I think that would be really difficult. We kind of touched on this a little bit in one of our 1v1s, talking about BGS having a chance of getting bought out by Fanatics. Like, that would make the most sense to me if they were to get into the grading space, is to buy one of the existing companies and use their expertise and their existing business. But clearly it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So it would make total sense that they're going to kind of step away, and it may still happen in the future, but clearly at the beginning of this launch, that's not going to be a focus of theirs. So yeah.
And that's a good point. Everything's so early. Like, I think even Josh Luber says in an interview, like, some of the things that he was asked, like, they hadn't had a deep discussion on with all the players,
Right.
In the same room. So it's still pretty early. But I echo what you guys think. I think it's really reassuring to have a guy like Josh at the helm of all these changes. Some guy who actually understands the industry and the hobby and has been in it. So that's definitely reassuring.
Right.
So, yeah, give it a read. I think you can find it on his website, www.tradingcardsarecoolagain.com, and that's not a joke. That's where awesome. You can read his paper. Yeah, it's the only thing on that website, so you can't miss it.
And if you forget that website, just literally Google Josh Luber white paper, and it'll come up.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's finish this episode off as we normally do then with Pick One. And this week, it's our Hot Takes edition, where we present two hobby hot takes, and we each debate which one is more likely to happen. So I'm not going to even ask who's going first. We all know who's going first.
That's right.
Leading off.
Inspired by Gary V himself.
Okay.
We're doing an underrated, overrated.
Got it.
A PSA 10 is underrated versus BGS is overrated. BGS 10, sorry. PSA 10 is underrated versus BGS 10 is overrated. So is a PSA 10 slab underrated? Because we all think PSA 10 slabs are overrated, to be honest.
Right. Yeah.
No, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm confused. I don't know what to
Yeah, I'm saying, well, that's a hot take, right? A PSA 10 is underrated.
Sure,
is it still underrated? Or is a BGS 10 overrated? Because it sells for a premium of a PSA 10.
Wait, so I think PSA 10s are overrated, and I think BGS 10s are underrated. So which one am I picking?
Well, that's what I'm saying. These are two hot takes.
Right.
They're both hot takes. You got to pick one.
Oh man, that's true. So okay,
I stumped you, eh?
Yeah, this is a huge stump. PSA 10s are underrated or BGS 10s are overrated.
My mind can't comprehend it still.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, I chose this one to mess with us.
Are PSA 10s underrated?
Wow. Oh my gosh. Holy. You know what?
Okay, think about it like this, John. Like, are PSA 10s more underrated or is BGS 10 more overrated?
Right. I still don't believe in any of the two. But of the two, I'm going to pick PSA 10s are underrated. And I only say that because we just got into this whole big Josh Luber thing about the market being in it, early on in the innings or in its infancy stage. And if we truly are, if this market really is going to grow to higher levels, and Fanatics is obviously not going to dabble in the grading card space for quite a while, to me, it's clear PSA is still going to be a monster, the king, and continue to be the king going forward. And with them not having graded as much in the last 12 months, I just think their branding, unless BGS and SGC come out of nowhere and really start to kill it, I still think PSA as a brand, as much as we may think it's overrated, I think it still has a chance to go even higher and higher and higher. So I will, of the two, which is really tough, I'm going to go PSA 10 because with the market climbing like it is and going to new spaces, I think PSA as a king of the brands, it's going to go with it. So let's go PSA.
How about you, Clark?
Yeah, I'm glad John went first because I'm going to just copy his answer. Like, it's still messing with my mind because, well, even last week's, I think it was last week's 1v1 that I brought up, like Steph Curry, Bowman Chrome, like, would you rather have a PSA 9 or BGS 9.5? It's kind of asking the same question,
right.
Like, are you a PSA snob or, do you see the worth of BGS cards, right? And Hyung's 1v1 is just taking it to the extreme. So I'm going to say, PSA 10s are underrated, I guess, is my answer because I don't get it, but a lot of people love PSA's grading. PSA 10 is the grail grade for them. So I think it could still go off the charts, and I don't like it, but I think that's the reality.
I don't think many people love PSA as in grading company. Truthfully, you love knowing your card is in the most valuable slab possible. Sure. I think that's why the PSA 10 is so coveted, right? More than I think they're actually legitimately the best grading company. I don't technically believe that, but knowing that the card that I have is in the best possible case, that's the joy and the lure of it, right? So.
But I just want to add, BGS 10s are freaking underrated.
They are underrated. I know. they are underrated.
Come on, people. BGS 10s.
Yeah, right? They are. Well, sometimes when you see like BGS 10s go for the same price as PSA 10, like that's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Buy the card, man, knowing that it's like literally one spec away from being like a flawless card. Come on.
Yeah.
So do I have to answer this?
Yes.
Because come on, man. You tortured us.
I'm not gonna. I can't say PSA 10 is underrated because I think it's super, super overrated. More so than BGS 10 is overrated. Okay. Yeah. I do like my BGS 10s, but I just think PSA 10s are way overrated in terms of the pricing. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right. That's a funny one.
Oh man.
All right, John, you're up.
Man, I'm going second fiddle to that one. That's gonna be tough.
A wrinkle brain, eh?
I know.
A wrinkle brain.
Yeah.
All right, so my 1v1 hot take, we're going into the next MLB season. Two of the most recent, hottest, hyped prospects that have already made a small dent into the league. We're going to go, your 2022 AL MVP is Luis Robert, or your 2022 AL MVP is Wander Franco. I think those are two, even when you go through the card shows and you talk to a lot of people, these are two big purchases right now. Like, people are trying to buy them up because I think there's going to be a lot of hype for these two guys going into the season. So I want to know your guys' thoughts. And they both had, Luis Robert had his best year. He improved in pretty much every statistical category, including strikeouts. And then Wander Franco, the dude was a beast, man, in his first year in the league. So what do you guys think?
I'll answer this first because it's easy for me, and it's kind of on a technicality. I think Lewis Roberts AL MVP for 2022. I think he's just ready now, whereas Wander Franco 2023, sure. I think he needs one more year.
Right.
So if you ask me what 2023 AL MVP, that would be a lot harder question for me. But I think Lewis Roberts is going to be a beast 2022. And I'm actually hoping to buy one before this podcast comes out.
Next week.
So about a week before people look for Lewis Robert rookie cards too. Yeah.
I'm gonna agree with Clark on this one and 100% go Luis Robert, just because he's gone through the struggles and of that rookie year, and kind of had a really good season last year. I think the power numbers need to increase with him. He needs to he has the potential to be a 30+ home run guy and hit over 300. So if that's the case, I think those are true MVP numbers. Just like Bryce Harper's this year. And I don't think Wander Franco, I think he's still young. I think it's going to take him a couple years to establish his kind of like, especially his power stroke. I think he has 20 to 30 in him as well. And he has a potential to hit, 330 plus, So I just think Luis Robert is next in line to do it faster than Wander. I think 2022, I'm going to pick Luis Robert.
Nice. I think this is the first time I'm loving the sweep. Because you guys know me, I'm a big Luis Robert guy. So to hear my peers agree with my Luis Robert sentiment, I love it, man. Yeah, I think everything you guys said. You know what though? I've invested a lot in Luis Robert. So from a card perspective, I sold all of my Francos prior, and I would love, like, I am on the hunt to try to get a Franco, because I think before the season starts, I think his hype is gonna explode next year, especially with his tops coming out, like his Series 1 and then the Topps Chrome, his Major League card. So I think Wander Franco is a big time buy. But in terms of MVP, yeah, like it's they're both amazing, and they're actually, the numbers are very, very similar. But I think for everything you guys said, he's a little bit older. He's been in the league for 2 years. I think he's probably a little bit more ready to take on that consistent numbers. So yeah, it's a sweep.
Yeah,
I like it.
Nice. All right, my 1v1 to finish the episode is Panini Select Basketball will be irrelevant by 2026. I use 2026 because of the license expiration. Or Upper Deck Hockey will be irrelevant by 2026. So essentially, I'm asking you guys, which set do you think is just going to mess it up in five short years?
Oh man,
yeah, this is tough.
You guys are killing me.
Upper Deck Hockey.
Yeah. Because we talked about in previous episodes, like Upper Deck's got to step up its game, and
right.
You know what? I think the Young Guns brand is so strong in Upper Deck that, like, I don't see it going away. Select it doesn't really have a rich history, to be honest. So I'm actually gonna go Select Basketball will be irrelevant in 2026.
Wow.
Courtside, man.
I know. Yeah, but there's nothing pre. When did Panini enter? Select enter. That's very, very recent, right? Like 2012 was Prism, so it was sometime after that, right? So yeah, that's just
Okay.
Man, this was a tough one, because I think for me it really stands on what my prediction is what's going to happen with Fanatics and who they're potentially going to buy out. So if they, there's still a chance they could buy out Upper Deck even though they didn't get the license. We talked about that. Maybe it was a better business decision to let Upper Deck take the license and then they do something afterwards. So when I thought about Panini, like I personally think Fanatics should and will go for tops. But as I thought of this question, I was like, you know what? I don't know. Like, aside from Prism and Select, Fanatics is big on memorabilia, right? We talked about that. And for them to go after the flawless NT Immaculate brands, like, that would be huge for them as well. So that made me think, oh man, maybe Panini's the better move. But then when on the flip side, you've got Upper Deck Exquisite brand starting to make a monstrous comeback. And that is definitely in that sort of memorabilia space, right? So if you're asking me the two, I think I think it's 50-50, but because we know for sure Panini's going to lose the license, I have to go with Upper Deck being the one that's going to come out on top, and Panini's going to lose out here. Yeah, on a coin flip, you got to go with the one that's losing the license.
Yeah. All right. So 2 for Panini. I asked this question for a reason because I feel like Upper Deck Hockey, like especially with their Series 1, Series 2, like there's nothing special, and they look the same year after year. I actually looked. Someone gave me a 2019 one of those tin boxes of Upper Deck. and like when you open it, you're like, oh, I got 0 hits. They look all the same, and I actually went over that box a couple of days ago, and I looked at my young guns. I'm like, oh, maybe one of them is actually a star now. Who's that guy in Carolina Hurricanes? Andre Svechnikov?
Yeah.
Yes. So I got his young.
Oh shoot, that's a good card, man.
I was like gonna toss that box away. I was like, this is 200 with the SGC grading, so I got to get that to SGC right away.
Yeah, no, that's a good card, man.
But I mean, like it's like year after year, it's the exact same thing. Like it's nothing outstanding, and I just losing faith with Upper Deck Hockey in general. But that being said, we talked about this earlier too with Select just ramping up their parallels. I just think it's going in the wrong direction, and I think it's going to be, for that reason, if it trends that way, it's just going to be even more irrelevant by the time we get to 2026.
Right.
So it's going to be another sweep for this 1v1.
Oh, nice.
All right, 2 sweeps. We haven't had that in a while. We see one of us will always disagree with one another's pick one, but okay, that's an extra long episode. I feel like probably the longest one we've had, but I thought it was well worth the discussion. Really diving deeper into Josh Luber's paper. And again, if you haven't read it, we encourage you to read it at tradingcardsarecoolagain.com. And it's worth your time. And it's you heard it from John and Hyung. They don't like reading, but it wasn't a chore for them to get through.
Awesome.
So
nice. No audiobooks though. There's no audiobooks for Josh. Come on, I want you reading that. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so with that, we'll wrap up. But thanks again for all our listeners and subscribers. If you haven't already, please subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcast so you get our weekly reminders of any new episodes that come in, which is every Tuesday. And with that, we'll see you next week. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at TradeU at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.